San Juan de Letran. His brother Pasiano is the one who accompanied him when he took the exam. During that time, the exam for incoming freshmen from different colleges were held at Colegio de San Juan de Letran, since the Dominican exercised the power of inspection and regulation over Ateneo that time. Rizal was qualified for the examination, but Father Magil Ferran, who was the college registrar that time, refused Rizal's admission because of two reasons. The first reason is Rizal was a late registrant, and second, he was very pale, thin, and undersized for an 11-year-old. But with the help of Manuel Burgos, he was accepted into that institution, and he was not able to use Mercado as his surname when he enrolled at Ateneo. He registered as Jose Rizal instead because his surname had rung a bell to the ears of authorities. This was because of Pasiano's relation with one of the leader of the secularization movement, Father Burgos. Rizal passed the exam and was admitted at the Ateneo Municipal. Rizal studied at Ateneo from 1872 to 1877 under the supervision of Jesuit priests. At the time, Ateneo was offering a 6-year program that gives students the academic title of Bachiller and Artes. This program exposes students to 5 subjects. Father Jose Beck was Rizal's first professor, and even though Rizal was left behind among his classmates at first, he was able to catch up by managing his time, and he excelled as the emperor in his class. Emperor is the title given to the most intelligent in the class. And on March 14, 1877, Rizal was able to pass his first oral examination. Rizal finished the degree, Bachiller and Artes, with the highest academic honors. With Rizal's scholastic records, it is evident that he excelled in academic studies during the entire time that he was studying at Ateneo. He wanted to prove to his Spanish classmates that a Filipino student can compete and beat them academically. The next part is Rizal's education in Santa Isabel College. To be proficient in Spanish and develop his skills in poetry writing, Rizal took private lessons in Santa Isabel College. But before he took up lessons, he was guided by Father Francisco Paulo de Sanchez in developing his skills in poetry. Through his poetry, he was able to finish poems about religion, education, and childhood experiences. Rizal also took painting lessons from Agustin Saez and sculpture lessons from Feodor de Jesus to enhance his interest in arts. As a result, he was able to sculpt the image of Virgin Mary in the Sacred Heart of Jesus. The next part is Literature of Rizal. The first poem that Rizal wrote as a student was entitled My First Inspiration. This poem was said to be dedicated to his mother during her birthday, but according to some people, this was a work of his cousin. The second poem that he wrote was when he was a student. The title is In Memory of My Town. It was written in 1876. This poem was his way of giving tribute to his hometown, Calamba. The content of the poem shows how Rizal appreciates the beauty of his place, which made him love nature and to strengthen his faith and beliefs in God. And here are the other notable poems of Rizal. The first is To the Child Jesus. In this poem, Rizal expressed his devotion to Catholicism. The next is The Intimate Alliance Between Religion and Good Education. And last but not the least is True Education of the Country. This poem is where Rizal shows his various ideas on education. The next part is Rizal's education at University of Santo Tomas. After Rizal's completion of Bachiller and Artes at Ateneo, he was admitted to higher studies at the university. But his mother, Doña Teodora, was against him to pursue higher education due to the martyrdom of Gomburza. However, his father, Don Francisco, sent him to UST. At first, he was not sure what course to take after graduation. His mentor suggested him courses, but he considered taking law or medicine. But his brother Pasiano discouraged him to take the law because of the political situation of our country before. He was 16 years old when he began his freshman year at UST and enrolled under the Faculty of Philosophy and Letters, major in philosophy. It is the course that his father wanted him to pursue. And during that time, he took surveying course at Ateneo and he excelled on the course that he took while he's still underage. But because of his age, he couldn't practice the surveyor's profession yet. Instead, Rizal was presented the title on November 25, 1881 His Excellency. After his first year, Rizal changed his course from philosophy and letters to medicine because Rizal believed that he should finish medicine so that he could cure his sick mother who had an eyesight failure.
Academic performance at UST. Rizal entered UST in April 1877 and took up philosophy and letters. The reason why he took these courses are because it was what his father would have wanted for him, and he was still uncertain as to what career to pursue. He also studied cosmology and metaphysics, theodicy, and history of philosophy. After completing his 1 year, Rizal decided to take up medicine as his university course. His change of heart was due to Father Pablo Roman because he advised him to pursue the course. Rizal's performance in UST was not as good as his accomplishment in Ateneo, where he excelled in all his subjects. On the contrary, some of Rizal's grades in UST were still excellent, but he had lower grades in other subjects. This might have been because Rizal was not actually happy while in UST. There are 3 reasons why Rizal's academic performance were not good. And these are the attitude of Dominican professors towards Rizal, the racial discrimination against Filipino students, and Rizal was disgusted at the primitive method used in UST. It was manifested in Rizal's scholastic records that he was not into a medical course. Most of his grades in his medical subjects were generally average. His real vocation was really in the arts. Rizal's not-so-good performance can also be attributed to a number of distractions he experienced as a youth in Manila. Specifically, his interest in women when he was a UST student. The first woman Rizal met when he started to work in the house of Doña Concha was Leonor Valenzuela, while the second woman that he met when he transferred to Casa Tomasina in number 6 Calle Santo Tomas in Intramuros was Leonor Rivera. Rizal started courting these 2 women, but when Rizal learned that Leonor Valenzuela was already engaged with another man, Rizal focused on courting Leonor Rivera, who was his third cousin from Camiling, Tarlac, who became his true love during his third year in UST. From this, we could tell that Rizal became very busy with other things, a reason why he had less time for studies. He also joined gang fights, attended parties, and even did cutting classes. Liberalism and literary works as a university student. Liberal ideas were significantly introduced in Manila, owing to the culmination of the Spanish Civil Wars, opening of Suez Canal, and the availability of the Philippines to world trade. Filipino students were heavily influenced by the introduction of these ideas, and were exposed to the country's significant revolutions of the 19th century, such as the revolution against monasticism, the revolution of human reason against the comforting certitudes of catechism, and the revolution of race and nation against inequality and subjection. To support the production of literary works in Manila, the Liceo Artístico Literario de Manila, an organization of art lovers in the city, initiated regular competitions in literary writing. Rizal joined the contest to prove that the Filipinos can be equal and even surpass the Spaniards in literary prowess. His works A la Juventud Filipina and El Consejo E Los Dios, which were sponsored by this association in 1879 and 1890, were recognized as the best entries in the competition. A la Juventud Filipina. This literary work is considered as one of the best works of Rizal. Rizal wrote it when he was 18. He expressed that he wanted to contribute to Spanish Philippine society, but instead of being famous to have the prize for excellence in the arts, it was rejected. This is the English translation of the poem. This poem won the grand prize in the contest wherein Rizal received a silver plate for sharing his talent in poetry. It was considered a great work in Philippine literature for the two reasons. First reason was the Spanish authorities noticed that it was the first best poem in Spanish written by a Filipino. And the second reason was it showed that the Filipinos were the fair hope of the motherland, a nationalistic concept that portrayed Rizal's love for the country. In his piece, he clearly mentioned that the Philippines is his motherland. However, the Spanish authorities did not see the political involvement of the poem. In the poem, Spain was considered to be the patria. But, contrary to what was written, Rizal used the term to mean the Philippines. Rizal, for that reason, was the first Filipino to call the country his motherland. He also pointed out in his poem the role of the youth in nation building. In the poem, he stated that the youth is the fair hope of the motherland. He challenges the youth of his day to practice three things, and these are to enhance their talents in the arts, to develop their knowledge of the sciences, and to not be afraid of the future and remove the chain of bondage. El Consejo E Los Dios. This is one of Rizal's entry in the literary contest of 1880. The poem was announced as the best entry in the competition that year. However, the jury knew that its author was a Filipino, so they decided to unfair the grand prize to a Spaniard. Even though Rizal didn't receive the best award, he had proven that Filipinos can compete with other races in a fair play, irrespective of the superiority of the Spaniards. El Consejo E Los Dios, or the Council of Gods, is an allegorical play written by our national hero Jose Rizal in 1879 and first published by Liceo Artístico Literario de Manila in 1880 and later by La Solidaridad in 1883.
Junto Al Pasig, a one-act zarzuela in Spanish, was staged by the Academy of Spanish Literature members on December 8, 1880. Rizal wrote it to honor Nuestra Señora de la Paz, Valdenueja de Antipolo, Our Lady of Peace and Good Voyage. During the teenage years of Dr. Jose Rizal, he wrote Junto Al Pasig as a commission work for the feast of patroness of Ateneo Immaculate of the Virgin Mary. The play was first performed by the Rizal schoolmates on December 8, 1880 at Ateneo Municipal de Manila, with music written by a Spanish professor. Filipinas is an inspiring poem that states that the Filipino youth are capable of great heights. It urged the Filipino youth to reach their potential by harnessing their skills and talents for the betterment of our countrymen. It motivates the youth to free Filipinos from ignorance and to seek freedom and human dignity. The poem reminds us that we as Filipino youth have a duty to serve our countrymen to our full extent. Activism at UST. Rizal displayed his leadership in student activism when he was pursuing philosophy and medicine at UST. He organized a secret society of Filipino students called Compañerismo, whose members are called Companions of Jehu. Rizal criticized the humiliating treatment of brown Filipinos by the Dominican mentors.
Jose Rizal traveled in Spain in 1883 after finishing his fourth year at the University of Santo Tomas. Rizal reportedly departed the Philippines as part of a secret arrangement with his brother Paciano. According to some stories, Rizal left the Philippines heading for Spain to observe life abroad and write a book demonstrating the Filipino nationalism, with only a few people aware of his departure, including neither his parents nor his beloved Leonor Rivera. Rizal's voyage, mostly funded by Paciano, who sent him money on a regular basis. But when the agrarian crisis in Colombo occurred, Rizal's allowance was delayed, and he was forced upon the diamond ring his sister Saturnina had given him before leaving for Spain. He even had to reduce his living expenses by skipping meals. After that, Rizal caught up with some of his former Ateneo municipal classmates on a regular basis in Spain, which helped to alleviate his homesickness. He also contributed articles to a Manila-based daily, including his first published essay, El Amor Patrio, Love of Country. He also spent time expanding his own collection, which included volumes about the lives of U.S. presidents and the history of the English Civil War. Rizal had two favorite books in his library: Harriet Beecher's Toes, Uncle Tom's Cabin, and Eugene Sue's The Wandering Jew. These two works made Rizal sympathetic to the poor and reminded him of the unjust relationship that existed between Filipinos and Spaniards. Rizal was inspired to begin writing his own book as a result of this experience.
Rizal was overwhelmed by the courage and camaraderie displayed by the Freemasonry. A Freemasonry or Masonry referred to a fraternal organizations that trace their origins to the local guilds of stonemasons that from the end of 13th century regulated the qualification of stonemasons and their interaction with the authorities and their clients. It did not take long before Rizal joined their ranks. Through influence of his uncle, whose name was Jose Alberto, Rizal was given access to the Acacia Lodge of Masonic Fraternity. Who is Jose Alberto? Jose Alberto is the paternal uncle of Rizal. He was the young hero's inspirations in sketching, painting, and also in sculpture. Rizal also met Don Pablo Ortiga y Rey, a former alcalde of Manila, whose house usually used for Filipino students meeting in Madrid. Rizal joined the group which named Circulo Hispano-Filipino. What is this group? And what is the purpose of this group? The Circulo Hispano-Filipino was established 1882 by a group of Filipino students in Madrid led by Mr. Juan Ataide, retired army officer and a Philippine-born Spaniard. The organization was able to publish their newspaper, which called the Revista del Circulo Hispano-Filipino. It was aimed to express the thoughts about the abusive Spanish government. However, the publication was short-lived due to lack of funds and conflict in political issues, leading to the dissolution of the organization. Rizal wrote to his family saying that it was voted on January 29, 1883, that the group was disbanded upon his suggestion, apparently due lack of sufficient interest of the members of this group. Rizal also regularly convened with his Filipino friend from the Los Indios Bravos, which include Juan Luna and Felix Hidalgo. What is this Los Indios Bravos? The purpose of this group is to write poems, stories, and newspapers, articles showing the current condition of the Philippines in the hand of Spaniards. Rizal learned different languages, including the English, German, and French. Despite of many engagement, is still making some of draft for his book.
Rizal's one greatest influence in writing his book was Dr. Feodor Jagor. Feodor Jagor is a German scientist and a traveler that Rizal met in Berlin. Dr. Jagor's book inspired Rizal to do something to emphasize the education, wherein the education is the answer to the current social condition in the Philippines. After talking about Dr. Feodor Jagor, let's now proceed to Dr. Maximo. man who was proud of his country and people, as well as an individual who had felt the pain and injustice imposed upon his fellow Filipinos. Here is the following list of some of his most important works. The Noli Tangere and El Filibusterismo are the two major works that had the most impact on Filipino nationalism. The influence rise to prominence among both the upper and lower classes. The Noli Tangere is a story about the oppressed Filipino people and their fight for freedom. It exposes the government's corruption and how it uses greed and power to impress its people. Significant to the development of Rizal's nationalist consciousness, it allowed him to explore his identity as a Filipino and develop his understanding of what it meant to be a Filipino. It allowed him to explore the reasons why Spanish colonialism in the Philippines was so oppressive and destructive, and how Filipinos could liberate themselves from this oppression. It allowed him to put his ideas into writing, which would later form the basis of his political writings. The El Filibusterismo is the sequel to his novel Noli Tangere. It exposes the friars' cruelty and shows how they oppressively dominate Filipinos. It refers to Filibusterism, which is political activity that uses illegal or unconstitutional method to achieve political aims. The Noli Tangere was written in Spanish, but this one was written in Tagalog. He wanted to write something that could be read by all Filipinos regardless of their background or language. It helped him develop his political beliefs and improve his writing style throughout time. He wrote it when he was more engaged in politics than art, showing how important it was for him to be able to share this message with everyone in his country. It taught him that literature alone would not be enough to influence people's minds about issues like independence from Spain or even just equality within society. He had to take action himself. Dr. Jose Rizal wrote the poem Mi Ultimo Adios while imprisoned at Fort Santiago. This poem expresses how hopeless one feels when faced with betrayal or death. It's also an expression of gratitude towards his friends and family for the support they gave him during such difficult times. He was sentenced to death by Spanish authorities in Manila for his political ideas and acts against the colonial government. The development of his nationalist consciousness is not just that it was written in the last year of his life and therefore represent a mature expression of his thought. It serves as a bridge between his earlier, more general works and more specific political works. Rizal reflects on his life and legacy, regretting what he has not accomplished, but doing that from the perspective of affirming his identity as a Filipino individual. The poem ends with the line, I have loved you, don't forget me. These words are not only an expression of Rizal's love for his country, but also an acknowledgement that he would live on in the hearts of those who knew him. Rizal nationalism was not simply a philosophy or an ideology, but rather the result of his personal experience and the circumstances in which he found himself. Public education did not arrive in the Philippines until the 1860s, and even then the Roman Catholic Church controlled the curriculum. Because the Spanish friars made comparatively little effort to inculcate a knowledge of Castilian, less than 1/5 of those who went to school could read and write Spanish, and far fewer could speak it. The Filipino populace was thus kept apart from the colonial power that had been ruling it for more than 3 centuries. After the construction of the Suez Canal in 1869, sons of the wealthy families were sent to Spain and other countries for study. The propaganda movement in 1872 to 1892 was the first Filipino nationalist movement led by a Filipino elite and inspired by the proto-nationalist activism of figures such as Jose Burgos and by his execution at the hands of colonial authorities. Propagandists were largely young men, often mestizos and Creoles, whose families could afford to send them to study in Spanish universities in Madrid and Barcelona. There they encountered the tumult of 19th century political movements inspired by Enlightenment thoughts, individual rights, constitutionalism, and anti-clericalism. It was an assimilationist movement in that the propagandists, many of whom were of half Spanish parentage and saw themselves as inheritors of Spanish civilization, believed that the Philippines should be fully incorporated into Spain as a Spanish province and not merely as a colony, with Filipinos granted the same citizenship rights accorded to Spanish citizens. Second, it sought the expulsion of the Spanish friars from the Philippines and the empowerment of a native Filipino clergy. Lastly, as a cultural movement, it showcased the writing and artistic production of the young Filipino elite as a means of demonstrating their intellectual sophistication on par with their Spanish peers. The propaganda movement targeted the Spanish government and public, but as an elite movement failed to engage with the wider Filipino population. The Spanish government was little interested in the conditions of the Philippines, particularly with the immense political movement in the Spanish political environment, and the movement ultimately received scant support and made little headway in Spain. The propagandists themselves were considered to be rebels at home in the Philippines, and many were exiled. Despite its overall failure, the movement generated a political consciousness that fed into the nationalist revolution of 1896 and the struggle for independence that followed.
It is about Rizal's involvement in propaganda movement. So what is propaganda movement? Propaganda movement is a series of communicative activities carried out by a group of Filipino through essays, books, and newspaper, which has the same objective that we will slowly unfold later. So here in this slide, we will see Rizal's contribution to the reform movement. And for the first one, it indicates here that Dr. Rizal, along with his fellow ilustrados, Marcelo H. Del Pilar and Graciano Lopez Jaina, are the forefront of the organization. And this simply means that they are the one leading that group whose mission is to speak about political and religious changes or improvements in their motherland, which is the Philippines. He also wrote some article for the Diaryong Tagalog along with Marcelo H. Del Pilar. And the three of them are the following, which are the Amor Patrio or Love for the Country, Los Viajes or Travel, and Revisita de Madrid or Review of Madrid. And for those who are unfamiliar with the Diaryong Tagalog, these are the controversial and the first bilingual newspaper published in Manila where intellectual like Dr. Rizal expressed their feelings and opinions about the unacceptable events happening on their country, exposing the greed and abuses of the Spaniards towards the Filipinos. While as for the La Solidaridad, this is the community of the Filipino rebels who have been deported in Spain. This serves as the voice and the main organ of the propaganda movement. Dr. Rizal joined La Solidaridad in 1888 and began submitting essays campaigning for political and religious reforms. And if you can recall what I said earlier, Rizal joined an organization led by Graciano Jaina Lopez. And this organization that I'm talking about is actually this La Solidaridad, wherein Rizal serves as an active and significant contributor, while Del Pilar edits the newspaper and assumes the leadership published on February 22, 1889. And this letter is to recognize the bravery and dedication of the 20 Filipinas from Malolos who wrote a letter to the governor seeking for some opportunity to let them study the Spanish language in lifetime and the Philippine a century hence. And in this work, he examined a variety of causes of the Filipino sorrow under Spanish colonization, and this one serves as his brave prediction of the fate of the Philippines within 100 years. And lastly, the indolence of the Filipino in 1890. As a response to accusation of Spaniards that Filipinos were indolent, Rizal tries to prove them wrong by giving them several reasons. For instance, his own outstanding talent and passion in writing that antagonized the friars who were usually his target of criticism.